Cooking away here on a Monday morning. Welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, coming on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live, and download our free app so you can stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. And we can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today, and it's really exciting to bring back a person that I've been collaborating with for over a month now, and it just continues to grow and take on a life of its own in a spiritual fashion. Also, to create knowledge and wisdom for those, as we build this tree of enlightenment as it relates to genius and addiction and living with that. Monica Getz, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Can you talk about the visits that Stan still gives you and the kinds of things that he talks to you about? Does he come to see, have you talked to him lately?
All the time. Last time he spoke to me was just this weekend. I went to hear Candido.
I interviewed Candido, the thousand-fingered man.
And Candido opened a little wonderful jazz club here. Well, it didn't quite open it. It opened a few months ago, but this is all new for us to have a little local jazz club less than 10 minutes away from me in Tarrytown called the Jazz Forum Art. And he played there, and I took some Swedish friends with me to listen. And everybody was on their feet. It was just wonderful. And then I went up to see if he remembered me, which he did, amazingly. And he remembered playing with Stan many times and recording with him. And I reminded him of the fact that I had once asked Stan who were 5 of his favorite players, and Candido was one of them.
Why did he say that? Because most people would say, the more and more I talk to singers, they say I've been influenced more by saxophone players, and for someone to say for Stan Getz, who played wind instruments.
You'll have to ask him, but I think Stan, when you asked him about something like that, he would talk about the whole musician. I think he was very impressed by Candido's naturalness and directness and unpretentiousness as a person, as well as he's a time machine. I remember him saying he was just impeccable. And it's Stan's favorite instrument was never drums, really, or percussion even.
Mm-hmm.
But that when someone was truly an instrumentalist, like Candido was, I remember Scott LaFaro too, he really noticed and he really appreciated it. And somebody who brings their something beyond the limitations of the instrument.
Very well said. Did you have a chance to see Stan play live? It was this sort of very brief period of time before Focus. I think Billy Higgins was on drums. I know he was playing with Scotty LaFaro. Did you see those sessions, those trio?
Sure, of course.
Can you talk about how
I knew Scotty really well.
You knew Scotty, because Scotty, here's the deal. I've done 1,000 primary source interviews.
He died when...
I know. Well, no, we're getting to that. But the point that there were, you have no idea. That Scotty LaFaro, like it or not, the on the West Coast, cats that were learning upright bass, who maybe eventually wound up in more electric rock settings, when they were coming up in the early '60s, all of them wanted to be Scotty LaFaro in terms of playing and the fact that he was a junkie. It was very appealing.
What? I never heard that Scotty was a junkie.
Well, I'm just, he was well, anyway, more importantly, can you talk about, at that time,
is that really true? Are you sure that's true?
I can send you audio of guys in folk bands called We Five who talked about friends of theirs who just all they wanted to be was Scotty LaFaro. They wanted to play that. They wanted to have that individual voice on the bass, and they wanted to be a junkie. And again,
I'm not questioning the musicianship, but was he a junkie?
Yes.
Well, he must have been in a stage of recovery when I knew him, because he seemed as sane and as calm and as healthy as anybody I've seen. So
Well,
maybe
let me ask you
think,
though, as somebody who is who has expertise in the field of understanding addiction, isn't that part of the addiction though? Is that you wouldn't know anyway?
well, it depends on what stage of the addiction people are in. It is true that 98%, I would think, of addicted people are functional. And it's not until the very later stages when it's really visible to the average eye and even to the skilled eye, because when people start to deteriorate physically, and when their tolerance, which builds up during the time that they are building up the addiction, when that breaks down, that is very late stages. And that's really how so many people are misjudged, because they can't believe, just like I couldn't believe that you said that Scotty LaFaro was addicted. I didn't know. Or maybe he was in a phase, they can all stop. It's staying stopped that's impossible.
Right.
Unless they go really into a spiritual program of some kind. And some people can also dry up and just be dry drunks, but that's very rare. Most people who really truly recover in the 12-step program. So I was really surprised, and of course, even Betty Ford, who I knew really well,
that's
had
awesome.
the world fooled. She was in the White House, and nobody really knew about it. So that is true.
But I mean, I mean, there was tragedy with LaFaro dying in a car accident. Would they have stayed together? How much did that change? Because right after that,
yeah, they did. They would have stayed together, because Stan always chose musicians that he got along with beautifully, and I don't see that there would have been any reason for them not to stay together. And that was a wonderful band.
And was Billy Higgins on drums?
I can't remember.
I need you to dig deep on this. I mean, you've been busy as all get. Your memory is so amazing, though. It doesn't.
Yeah.
But I mean,
I just don't want to be incorrect and say that I remember that Billy was on that band, but I do remember how tight they all were and how they broke down when Scotty died. It was like we were all out of breath. It was just like life couldn't go on for a few days. You couldn't think of anything else but this young, vibrant, talented person all of a sudden taken from us.
Talking to Monica Getz here on the Jake Feinberg Show. I'd like you to talk a little bit about the first feeling that you got when you entered the Gershwin mansion. I mean, that to me, it's a place that it has almost a folkloric sort of, on the outside reading about it, or, Dave Holland told me when, his wife used to come down and do horticulture with you there, and it's...
Yeah.
So I want Monica, it wasn't like, in today's world, Monica, there's so much. I mean, Stan was more about connecting with the gods musically than he was about making a lot of money. He liked to make money, but he wasn't driven by that. Today, we are really in this time of berserko capitalism. So people would almost buy a place like that just to show it off. But for you guys, it seemed to be almost a sanctuary. I could be wrong. I would like you to talk about it.
First of all, it was a necessity, because we were perfectly happy in the house we were living in, about 10 minutes away from here. On top of a hill, it was like just a charming little miniature White House with a view 180 degrees. We could see Manhattan. It was nothing but happiness up there. But all of a sudden, we had rented it with an option to buy, and the owner just went ahead and sold the land underneath us. So we're left with no alternative but to start looking for something else. And it was in the years 66, when the kids were in their formative years, and They all listened to different kinds of music and required privacy. And some real estate lady came to us and said, there is something across the street, but it's not the same as the house you're living in now. That was on 25 acres. But in those days, these white elephants, as they were considered, were very reasonable. In fact, the people practically gave them away. So Stan hadn't really made any serious money then, so I took it from some of my inheritance that I had and just bought it, I think, for $25,000 down or something like that. And when I first saw it, actually Stan and Alec Wilder saw it first. And
Wow.
Alec Wilder came back lyrical about it. Oh my God, it brings me back to my childhood. And you should see the kitchen garden full of rare plums and asparagus and all kinds of things. So I got interested, but I wasn't so impressed because that little miniature White House that we had was just full of light and air, and this house had belonged to a Mrs. Newberry of the Newberrys 5 and 10, I think, or something like that, before we bought it. And they had only a few other owners, and it wasn't until later that I found out that Irving Berlin's future bride grew up in this house, and that he gave that song, I'll Be Loving You Always, in my music room. And Stan had fallen in love with the idea because he had been told about the Always story, and that was his very first recording. Can you imagine how interesting life is?
I mean, so it was, even though it was light, airy, and swinging in this other White House, this lore was, this was almost a magnetic sort of, you were getting pulled in there because
it was darker and gloomier, but it was a case of, as we put our imprint on it, and as we started to open up the curtains and lighten the colors inside, it was like it grew on us, like a rosebud that sort of slowly opened up and welcomed us. And it was a monstrosity as far as I was concerned because it was so big. But and the architecture were more Shakespearean than it was that light, airy thing that the White House has. So it somehow it grew on us, and the children were able to have their own. Stephen had like his own private room and a sitting room where he could have his friends, and each one of the children could have a wing, and so they could play all that music as loud as they wanted, and it didn't interfere with anybody. And Stan could play his music as loud as he wanted, and the music room was like an addition. So eventually he built a recording studio here with Jonathan Horowitz, which was like the state of the art. So it turned out to be a dream, but it's not anything I would have chosen, I don't think, if we could have stayed in the original house. But as it was, we turned out to like it way better. It was very solidly built and is to this day a tribute to what people could achieve a couple of hundred years ago.
Well, no, I mean, the other thing is that dear friend of the program, I just spoke to a while back, Jimmy Cobb, and Elena T was mentioning that.
Yeah, he was here.
Yeah, they were up there
recently
cooking. They were cooking the groove in the. Is it a performance room? Is it a ballroom? What is it exactly?
Well, it's an interesting story, that too.
Yeah.
It was built as a huge library, and it's circular, and it has pillars, and it's very imposing, and it has Tiffany windows. And then Caruso, who was a guest of a seminal person in Irvington, came here to sing, and he stood in the middle of that room, and he discovered that it had perfect acoustics. So he became all aflame about converting that room from a library. So the family then built another library in another part of the house, ripped out the bookcases, and put up settees around the room, so it became an actual music room, a concert room. And so we have had every wonderful musician there that you can think of, from Segovia to Ellington to Dizzy. Tony Bennett sang in that
Duke
room.
Ellington. Duke Ellington was there.
Mm-hmm.
Can you please talk about that experience? I only knew that I always thought that Stan and him were rubbing elbows at the Rainbow Room, but Duke, I want you to talk about Duke and the Getz in this man.
Okay.
Unbelievable.
They loved each other. And interestingly enough, Duke and I got to be very close. He also had a special feeling for Sweden and how civilized the Swedes were, and how he was always appreciated in Sweden.
Wow.
So we got to talk very much. He was very upset with Norman Granz. I guess he felt taken advantage of by Norman. But he and I got along very well. And when my youngest son, Nicky's friend, had a terrible accident on the Hudson River, this friend of Nicky's was taking pictures of a friend of his who had built a Tom Sawyer float, and he was the youth reporter for the local paper. And he had climbed up what he thought was a tree. It turned out to be an electric pole. And when he reached up, he felt himself falling, and he reached up for getting security in a branch. It turned out to be a live wire, and he lost both his arm and half a foot.
And Stan and Duke played a benefit concert for him, right?
Exactly. I'm looking right now at
unbelievable.
At a poster that Max did donated for that concert, and Dizzy came to that, and a lot of wonderful people. The only one who refused to come, who we contacted, and I never could get over how cold he was Woody Allen. Everybody else.
Well, he's got his own demons he's dealing with right now.
I don't know. There's something very odd about it.
Well, I mean, just his lukewarm statement about that scumbag Weinstein is amazing, really. I mean, the guy.
Oh, it's defensive, don't you understand?
Of course. Well, no, I mean, I'm not listening. I don't like the politically correct times necessarily that we live in, but I got to say, just his response alone just reeks of defensiveness. Exactly. So Woody didn't show, but I mean but I don't know why. You pivoted to that. So Duke came to that concert, though.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He came, even though he had 2 other shows. He brought his whole intact band and played for that boy, and I'll never forgotten it. He was just so. Anyway, he was in that music room, and he played. He was always the kindest, most gracious, elegant gentleman, probably, that I've ever known. And I've known quite a few gentlemen, but he was in a category. He used to call Stan and I. What was his expression? Something about another category. They are in a whole other category, and I really thought the same of him. He was just in a category of his own. This
is something that's kind of gets overlooked, and I want you to put this in perspective because, Jazz Samba came out, and Kenny Barron, when I interviewed Kenny, another dear friend, I hope that you're still close with Kenny because, I mean, he and Stan
Kenny's coming here 2 weeks from today to play at Steve's memorial, our oldest son's memorial service, in that very music room that he played with Jimmy Cobb in the spring.
What's the date of that? What's the date of that?
The 28th.
Wow.
28th of October.
Yeah, no, I heard about Steve, and I wanted to talk to you about that, him playing with Stan in South America. But what was revealing to me about Barron was that Desafinado was really the first big hit. And can you talk about Monica Getz's role with Desafinado, because you clearly played an instrumental role behind the scenes with Ipanema. We're not going to go there yet. I'd like you to talk about your role with Desafinado and whether, I mean, it's sold.
Zero zilch. My role with Desafinado was zero zilch. Who really deserves credit for that is Charlie Bird, because Charlie was sent, I gather, from the State Department on some kind of South American tour. And he picked up all these lovely songs, and he was trying to persuade every record company including Stan's record company, to record him. And nobody wanted any part of it. This is at the height of rock and roll, and they didn't want to record it. Stan, almost as an act of mercy, ran into Charlie. I was in Sweden at the time, actually. I was
because I just want to get the chronology here, because you
the chronology is that this probably was in 1962, I could guess.
Right.
And I was in Sweden having our youngest son, Nicky, and because I would always go to Sweden to have my babies because the medical system is so much better than here. Would
you do a home birth too?
No.
Okay, but was that even something on the radar? I mean, I just talked to somebody now about recently, not a musician, but somebody who was having a baby at home even something that was even considered at that time?
No, not at that time.
Okay. So you were in Sweden, and no, because the word was that Bird went down with an analog cassette tape, and he was getting all these Brazilian rhythms, and
I believe that's probably true. I never discussed this with Charlie, but for some reason he and Charlie never got along very well, because I think after they probably got along like a house on fire when they did the music, because you can almost hear it in the music. But Stan was never really fully satisfied because he liked the original tape so much and the feel on the original tapes. So we were in Sweden. I was in Sweden with the children. It was one of those times when I just had enough of Stan's episodes, and I just wanted to protect the children. And I was seriously thinking of just raising them in Sweden in peace and quiet and all of that. So happens that they never really took to the Swedish schools, and they weren't really happy in Sweden.
Dave has told me that he loved it, but again, I mean, everybody had their own.
Yeah, Dave married a Swedish girl eventually.
Exactly, and he's the free spirit of all the cats, man. What a delightful individual. But anyway,
he's just lovely. Yeah. Dave is just a lovely, sweet, beautiful kid. Yeah. But anyway,
the kids didn't vibe with it. But you were sick and tired of Stan, and then
I stayed at my grandmother's castle, and this funny part is that he sent me the tape of the Desafinada thing, and I played a couple of other things for my grandmother and that, and for some reason her little foot was tapping at that, and I thought myself that it was so infectious and sweet and innocent. So when I came back with the kids, which I did eventually in the fall, I got on Stan's case and I said, if you weren't happy with Desafinada, which all of us thought was so good and interesting, why not make a record with the original Jean Gilberto and Jobim and all of them? And he says, I hear they're such a pain in the neck, as if he wasn't a pain in the neck himself. So eventually...
it's a perfect harmony there. That's unbelievable.
Eventually, I talked him into going because there was some kind of huge, much too huge concert arranged by the Brazilian embassy, I believe. In an effort at doing good PR for Brazil, they brought in everybody and their cousin and favorite pet to Carnegie Hall, and there was a mishmash of crossed wires and malfunctioning microphones, and Stan stayed for a little while, and then he got impatient. And I talked to João and Jobim, who really stood out in that concert as the only viable people. And so I talked to João, and João said to come to the hotel where he stayed, some funky hotel. And Stan got impatient and went home, and I was to take a taxi home. And I stayed in that lobby, I remember, and waited, because João would never do anything unless the moon was in the right position and the stars was in another position.
He was an astrology freak.
Well, not really. I'm just making an image of, he just had to be in the right groove for and it wasn't what we others consider anything that we could relate to. But whatever it was, eventually, after hours and hours and hours of waiting, I got a phone call to come up and listen to what he wanted to play, that he wanted me to tell Stan about, that he wanted to play if they were to ever work together. So I spent an unforgettable evening in that room that looked like a helicopter had landed there somehow 5 minutes ago, because everything was, there were socks hanging in the chandelier. It's sort of a movie scene practically of some derelict room. But however, he sat there cross-legged like a Buddha figure and played this unbelievable music. So when I got home, I said, Stan, this is the way to go. You got to listen to this. So I invited him home for dinner, and I think he stayed for many, many years.
I just want to go
in my house.
Well, no, I mean, Todd Barkin talked about New Year's Eve waking up the next day with João Gilberto, a whimsical, again, but this thing about Bird, I want you to be, I was going through my interview with Jimmy Cobb, and he talked about Keeter Betts getting him his first gig with Earl Bostic. And Keeter was playing bass on Jazz Samba. Part of the issue, though, was that there was no word for bossa nova yet. It was samba.
No.
Okay, so
it was called Jazz Samba.
It was called Jazz Samba, and at least could you talk about? I mean, obviously, ultimately, Stan and Charlie collaborated on it, and if you listen to the album, it is not electric. It's acoustic. It's beautiful. It's typical in that Charlie Bird bag with Stan blowing over the top. But eventually, what was their relationship? Was there a falling out after this?
Oh, they fell out completely. But it wasn't hard to do with Stan. So
can you? No, but here's the thing. Can you talk? I want you to. This is why I need you to talk about is this. Could you talk about how you said what would be easy with Stan to fall? Would Stan just cut off all communication? Would he be gruff? I mean, I think you need to talk a little bit about how he would.
Well, he was annoyed because, truthfully, he felt, and I guess he had a point, that he was doing Charlie a favor because that song became famous all over the world, and Charlie's name became a household word, and it changed his career from being virtually unknown outside Washington, D.C., and he was very well known and loved in the area of Washington, D.C., but outside of that, nobody had ever heard of Charlie Bird. So Stan felt he did him a favor because all the other musicians that he had approached and all the other record companies that he had approached didn't want to do it. So Creed released the record as a Stan Getz album featuring Charlie Bird. For some reason, it went to Charlie's head, and I can see where this happens too.
Right.
It went to his head a little bit, and he didn't feel that he deserved to be a side man, that he should have been a partner in this venture, and so he sued both Verve and Stan. And
on what grounds?
That he should have gotten 50% of the royalties. But Stan was a big name then, and
I wanted to talk to you about that too. Stan was known outside of. Stan was
a world name already then.
He was a world name in jazz. He wasn't a star though. He wasn't the international star yet.
No, he was not a Beatle. He was
not a Beatle. He was not a Beatle.
Yeah.
I love it.
But what happened is that in retrospect, we can all be wise in retrospect and be backseat drivers. I think Charlie felt that he didn't make himself a good enough deal. And maybe yes, maybe no. I'm completely neutral on that because I wasn't involved in it. I'm not going to take any credit for it. But it just happened that it was a really wonderful record, and it was the beginning of this bossa nova catching on. So it became a bossa nova thing with bossa nova T-shirts and all kinds of craziness going on, which Stan hated because he really was a pure jazz musician at heart, and he didn't like all of that circus around it, people hanging on to it for commercial reasons. So he liked the record good enough, but as you said, he wasn't satisfied. But it wasn't Goldie's perfectionism; it was his own image of what he had in his mind.
I can't believe you just brought up Goldie. I mean, you know that there's a tangent there. Maybe not with this particular thing. Goldie.
Well, I know that you are thinking about.
Well, no, we're just having a dialogue. We're having a dialogue. You know, that's the thing. I want you to put. This is important because we're going to do this on camera as well. But this is an important part.
I'm a good listener. I listen.
No, and you told me. Listen, do not be afraid to ask anything. You know, I'm just a young.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, no, but I think this is something that gets left out a lot in sort of the riffraff and the writing is that. Going back to his first wife, Bev, she was in a full body cast following that harrowing car accident. Stan, at a certain point, was in love with you, fell in love with you, and then, he had to divorce her. But can you talk about how you tried to take Big Bev did recover. She came out of the cast. She remained a little bit. She was always a little. Could you talk about how you supported her, even though you were sort of in this position of being the Stan's wife? You didn't abandon her at all.
She and I had the nicest relationship, and I know it's hard for people to believe or to swallow, but we did, because their marriage, I think, was pretty much over after Stan got out of jail. She was so heavily addicted, and Stan was scared straight. So when I met Stan, he did eventually tell me about his family and all of that, and I was not about to get involved with all of that situation. But what happened is that after she was in the accident coming from California to Tulsa, where this happened, she was in a cast. She had a crack in her spine, but mostly her hand was damaged. She never really, and I didn't realize it, got away from the drugs. They maintained her on the drugs in the hospital, or possibly that she got back on drugs as soon as she got out of the hospital. I'm not clear, but she was always on drugs, and I didn't understand it. Just like you said, we were talking about Scott LaFaro. I had no idea that she was on drugs.
He was on, yeah, absolutely. That was, and in fairness, that was exactly during the time period in the mid '50s when Stan, or before he moved back, before you saw him in American University, when the West Coast Cats, when Stan and Bev were, just using in Topanga Canyon, and Scotty LaFaro was doing that on the West Coast too. And I just know, I'll send you some audio of this drummer Bob.
Scotty LaFaro was when I knew Scotty LaFaro, that was later, much later.
Right,
but
exactly.
In any case, let's not lose our threads here, because I want to make this very clear that Beverly was like a friend of mine. I felt that I wanted to do right by her and by the children, and I tried to set her up in this apartment. I talked my parents-in-law to give up their apartment in Bayside. We helped furnish it, make it really nice with her and the children. And I never in a million years would I have considered taking away children from a mother. Never. So I thought that they were going to be just fine. And Stan and I went to California. We lived in Beverly Hills, where Donna Reed helped us find a place. And then we got these phone calls from Stan's mother, who said that, Big Bev, as she was called, was passed out. And it was impossible for the children. They never went to school. There were people hangers-on because Stan sent her first hefty maintenance and then and child support, and then eventually a big sum so that she would be okay with the children. And practically everything he had, just like he had sent to his parents when he was a young boy, he sent as much as he could to her and the children. And apparently it all went for drugs, and the refrigerator was empty, and the kids had to go downstairs to get food. It was just a situation that we had never dreamt of.
This is the one thing I wanted. This is important because you treated her
as a friend.
Definitely after she had, she was out of that house that she was in, and the kids were, but there's this thing where you and Stan were dating, and at some point you guys returned back to the house, and Bev becomes enraged, and a tug of war ensues with Steve. Can you talk about some of the growing pains that you obviously became friends at the end, but there are a couple of things. There was one, I think, also in we
were friends from the beginning, but she was intoxicated.
There was like a fight with purses or something. I mean, can you talk about some
of no purses.
No purses.
What happened was that we lived. This is way after the initial. It becomes confusing, I think, for the audience if we jump back and forth.
No, I want to be clear. You started it was in Queens, that original house, and then you went to Long Island.
The house which we had made ready for Bev when she disappeared. She got arrested. She and Tony Fischella got arrested for drugs in the apartment, and the children were then going to be wards of the state. So I had to do something really quick. Stan called me to come in from California. We had an attorney, Izzy Stratner's uncle, I think it was, who helped us see to it that the children didn't become wards of the state because there was no mother to claim custody, and Stan couldn't get custody because he had recently
lost his cabaret license. Yep, right.
Yeah, not only lost his cabaret license, but he was a convict and he was on probation. And in those days, giving custody to fathers was unusual, let alone somebody who had been arrested for drugs. So that was out of the question.
Right.
So I had to go to court, and with the support of Stan's mother, who was very grateful and sweet to me, because she claimed she had taken care of Steve temporarily, because apparently it had been a long time since Big Bev had been able to take care of the children properly. So she had Steve and at one point little Bev too, and she just felt that she was too old. She just couldn't raise the children. So she came to court with me, and I, 21, I guess, or 22, early 20s, got custody of these three little urchins, and they were the sweetest things, but they had never really had any kind of discipline or any time that the parents felt guilty, they gave them another toy, but they really had not been able to be parents. And I understand that. They had this illness of addiction, both of them. Of course. Yeah. But I had never had a harsh word with Beverly, and all of a sudden she's at the door, and I think Tony or somebody was getting her up to this, of some kind of a blackmail situation, where I guess they were desperate for drugs and they didn't have any money. So she came bursting into the house, and I had a Dansk, that's a designer, a cutlery set on the table, and she grabs that knife, and I totally didn't know what to do. And so I moved towards the phone, and she lunges for the phone and cuts off the wire. And I'm thinking, oh, my God, this is going to be one of those really bad movies.
I mean, with the knife, she cut the wire?
Yeah.
Oh, my God, this is harrowing.
So that was really scary. So little smart Steve went on his little bike. He had just gotten a bike with a support on it, and he went to the neighbors, and he called the police. Very smart. I mean, he'd watched enough movies, I guess, and knew what to do.
Yeah, he had a lot of time to watch when that flunky and I mean they were just watching TV and eating junk food. That to me was, but this
Yeah,
was in like
unbelievable.
Oyster
And
Bay, right?
he-
This was in Oyster Bay.
No, this was not in Oyster Bay.
It's somewhere in
This was
Nassau County though. This was, I mean, there was the
no. We moved to Nassau County. We moved to Great Neck. After
Great
we
Neck.
had
Thank
lived in
you,
that
thank you,
apartment.
Great Neck. I'm a Stony Brook guy.
Yeah. So anyway, what happened is that she cut the wire, and Steve called the police, and the police came, and they just ran away. I think that was the end of that. That was the last I saw her in about 17 years. So it was really frightening. But I don't think she meant any harm. I think, as addicts do when they get desperate for drugs, they're thinking, what's the best source of money? And they thought probably that Stan or I could be a source of money. Stan wasn't home, and I had nothing to hand her. I probably would have if I had, but I didn't have any large amounts of cash lying around. And we were struggling as it was, So that was that incident. And I never had any harsh feelings towards her. I felt terrible for her because, Stan always felt terrible for her, too. She came from Lowell, Massachusetts. I think both parents alcoholic, and I've heard said that 9 children out of 10 died of alcoholism. So I think her last sister died. So there's a whole other generation of the Byrnes out there. She was born Byrne, B-Y-R-N-E, and she had this lovely, talented brother who really cared about her and had put her in a convent to get her away from the home situation. So she was raised in a convent and then went out on the road, probably and possibly a very good singer. I tried to, at the time, to take her to Elizabeth Arden and to get her teeth fixed, but she could never keep an appointment, and I never understood that.
That's
no
what I remember.
teeth.
You were trying to advocate for her because, I don't know, in some ways it here you are, and again, just stepping back here, Monica Getz, Swedish grad student coming to American University. Stan's wife is in a body cast, being driven, after being driven by a flunky across the country, and Dave almost. I mean, I really, in my mind, I don't understand how he, in that time with modern technology, medicine, how he even survived. But he did, and he not only that, he became a very productive citizen. It does come across as a little bit on when you read about that Stan was sort of saying, "Okay, you're incapacitated, you can't do anything. I'm moving on."
No. That marriage was over when Stan went to jail. When Stan went to
And you're
jail,
talking about the Seattle drugstore jail.
Well, it was only one jail. It was only one jail, and that was the Seattle drugstore was when Stan was out on probation from the original arrest, which was in Los Angeles. And he got 6 months for that.
He got 6 months in Los Angeles. He was on probation, held up the drugstore, and was arrested again.
Was arrested during the time he was just out on what is it called when we don't have that in Sweden, but here you pay a certain amount of
parole.
money.
He was on parole.
Well, or on bail or something.
Yeah, right.
like
Okay,
that.
right.
Yeah, I didn't know him at the time, but apparently he was out on parole. Yeah, and he got arrested again in Seattle, and then brought back to Los Angeles for trial and found guilty and sent to jail for 6 months. That was the end of their marriage because Stan got sober by a miracle, scared straight, I call it. He didn't go to any program. He just was really scared of what he had experienced, especially at the L.A. County jail. He was kept up there in the heat without air conditioning, and that's when the only time that I know when he really tried to kill himself and took all those barbiturates, and they had to perform a tracheotomy on him right in jail there, and he was lying on the floor bleeding.
This is so important. So you definitively can say that he did not try to cut his own throat.
No. He didn't try to cut his own throat, but he was trying to kill himself.
So you're right. He was ingesting all the pills. Thank you. Also, just for the record, Big Bev was a couple floors above giving birth to Beverly.
I don't know the timing of it.
The timing
that's.
I think it
was during the time when he was in jail that she gave birth to Beverly.
Right, in the same hospital.
Beverly's born February 19th, and I don't know when he was actually put in jail. I haven't gone back there to kind of research that. I have no idea. But Beverly was born 54 in jail while he was in jail.
Exactly.
Little Beverly.
Right. Now
and Big Beverly was living with her connection. Can you imagine? And the children. I just can't even imagine. And after Stan got out, they sent him the last few months. The L.A. corrections sent him to some kind of farm because he had become a celebrity just by the notoriety of this whole thing. And so they didn't want him to look emaciated and pale as he looked from his harrowing experience at the L.A. jail. So they sent him to some kind of farm, which in itself he had humorous stories about a jewel thief, a very famous jewel thief, who was a cook there, taking special interest in him and would slip him extra bacon, and they fattened him up there, and he was working out in the sun, so he was very healthy looking when he got out of there, and healthy because he couldn't get the drugs there.
All right, I'm just going to read. This is on deep background here. During sentencing, Stan, this is from 1954. 54. During sentencing, Stan is admonished by the judge, "You have talent, family, and money, but you are broke, and your family is living in horrible conditions." He spent 6 months in jail, 3 months probation in 1954. Stan's third day in prison, Beverly Getz rushed to L.A. General Hospital. She is assigned a bed on the 8th floor, 5 floors below where Stan was being kept under armed guard. And that's when Bev was born.
Wow.
Yeah. But again, it all reads like a movie. Now, one of the things about Monica Getz that a lot of people don't realize, and it's just so exciting to be able to highlight this stuff, is that when you did connect with João in the Lotus position in Brazil, and he was playing his 2-beat rhythms, and Jobim actually wrote the song "Girl from Ipanema."
Yeah, Jobim too. I got in contact with Jobim. We had such a fun, intelligent conversations, and he was so enthusiastic about Stan. And the two of them told me that the whole origin of the bossa nova was that he and João would sit in Brazil and listen to Stan's and Jerry Mulligan's records, and it was those harmonies that they simply lifted over and put on top of the samba beats. And that was the origin of the bossa nova.
See this. Okay, so
Stan never knew this. I came home and told Stan fell on the floor by surprise when I told him that. He literally got down on the floor and lied down and looked in the sky, and he says, "I can't even imagine."
I just want to say this is one of the greatest things about Monica Getz being an advocate for her husband's career. The day of the session of Getz Gilberto, Monica saves the day by luring João out of his hotel room. She speaks Portuguese to him for 3.5 hours. You coaxed him out of the room. He was petrified of...
Who told you that? Because I don't think I told that myself.
Well, no, I mean, listen, listen.
Was that Creed Taylor?
Creed backed it up. Creed backed, and I got to tell you, I mean, this is so revelatory because you spoke Portuguese. He was not coming out. He had some kind of phobia about being with people. And can you take us through that? This is absolutely, because otherwise that never would have happened.
First of all, he wasn't in a hotel room. If Creed said that, it wasn't correct.
Well, wherever he was. Yeah, he was in your house.
He was here. He stayed here.
He was in the mansion.
From the time he came to dinner, he stayed here for years.
course.
In my house.
Years.
In this very house that I'm sitting in now.
Years, he'd say.
Years.
In the attic somewhere? Did he
Different wives.
Yeah. Wow.
No, we had like a penthouse apartment upstairs. It was the old servants' quarters, and he loved it there. And he just stayed there. And sometimes his daughter Bebel came, and sometimes a new wife came, and another wife left. But he stayed, and we all loved him.
So anyway, I want you to explain to me what you were saying for three.
Well, we had a special. Chihuahua and I had a special connection. You know how you feel close to somebody without understanding
Absolutely.
why? We had that connection, Chihuahua and I. Chihuahua was also very spiritual. He had a guru called Yogananda, and who was very mild. And they actually have a self-realization center.
Hold on, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, or who was Yoga?
No, Yogananda was.
He was the original cat. Wow, that's amazing.
Yogananda now has. When Nikki and I, my youngest son who lives in Los Angeles, when we get together, I usually go out there every Thanksgiving and make him a turkey, and we then go to the Self-Realization Center, which is built. It's a miniature little paradise right in the middle of L.A. Most people don't even know about it. It's the most beautiful little nature preserve, and quite a wonderful congregation of people who are followers, who is a very tolerant kind of approach to spiritual leadership, and they respect all the world's religions. And it's very interesting. I'd never heard of Yogananda until Chihuahua, so we connected on a spiritual level. And so Stan knew that the only one who could get him out to do this session was I. And by luck, I had studied, when I first came to America at the University of New Mexico, I had studied Inter-American Affairs. Eventually,
you were living in Albuquerque, You were living in Albuquerque?
I
can't believe that's revelatory. That is never before told.
I was a scholarship student. The Lovelace Foundation, they were doctors, and they were friends of my parents, Mr. and Mrs. Lovelace, and they gave me a medical scholarship to come to UNM, and that's where I became a cheerleader and member of Pi Beta Phi. Can you believe it?
You were a sorority girl.
Because Mrs. Lovelace was a Pi Beta Phi, so she gave me a scholarship, so I ended up there. And cheerleader is very funny because I never could figure out football, so people would come from miles to see me cheer for the wrong team. For the wrong team, consistently. So it was very funny. But anyway, I studied Spanish and Portuguese there.
And you became so could you talk?
And then eventually I transferred to Georgetown and became a special student at Georgetown and studied Inter-American Affairs there too. So and that's how I met Stan, was in Washington after I had been to New Mexico and after I had been enrolled at Georgetown Foreign Service School.
Do you remember?
So that's the sequence.
Was it something where you guys were sort of just going around in circles? Like what was Zhao's hang up, and how did you get him out to actually go to the session? Because Monica, the thing here is about history is that there is no girl from Ipanema without Monica Getz getting him out of there. Because what Creed did say was, when you got to the studio, who was there? Phil Spector was there, and he said, he was talking to Creed. He goes, I've never heard a rhythm like this before, and it was the 2-beat rhythm that Zhao was playing. And Stan, okay, so can you just talk about what that conversation was like? And 3.5 hours, that's like a hostage kind of situation. How did you get him out? How did you get him out? To
tell you the truth, I had a feeling in our relationship that he would do almost anything to please me. And in the end, I just said that this is what you've been waiting for all your life, an opportunity to bring this beautiful music to the world. So let's go. And so eventually I was able to calm him down enough. I think he was just a hyper sensitive human being, and any little vibration would throw him off completely. And just by being with him alone and talking about the beautiful things in the world and how God was in charge, I was able to calm him down enough to come and actually do this record. And, almost all of it was first takes.
Yeah, I mean, I want to get inside. So it was, and like, because...
And Stan was stone sober.
That to me, the fact that he had to wait 3.5 hours and was stone sober is unbelievable.
No, Stan was stone sober. That whole period, Stan was absolutely on the top of his form completely, and so happy at the end of you had mentioned to me at one time that he was never happy. He was completely happy at the end of that session.
I don't think I said that. I want to be clear, though, that what was different about it was the rhythm that João brought to it. That's where samba went to bossa. That's right where that transition occurred. According to Creed, that's where bossa nova took hold as an actual name, because when Creed was trying to push that with once they cut jazz samba, and they said nobody knows what is bossa nova. Nobody knows what that means. It was called samba, but at that point, that's when this sort of new vocabulary came in. I mean, like Ron Carter told me, every single producer of every genre and style of music was searching for that sound after that album came out.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And I knew it was magic.
How did you know?
I could not understand how. I can't remember what his last name was, but you can maybe help research that.
Of course.
The recording not producer, he was the executive director of Verve at that time. Absolutely unfeeling. He says, bossa nova, that was, the jazz samba, that is passe. We're not going there anymore. I'm not releasing that album. I couldn't believe it. I was so upset. So that's when I went to Billboard. And they had a guy in charge of the charts, Bill something, terrific guy. And I said, give me a lesson and a few sentences on how to make a hit record. And so he was I had a pencil and a piece of paper like a good student. And he said, well, the first thing you have to do, and that's all I can remember, is to go to these people who pick for the disc jockeys. This was the times of payola, and I wasn't going to go there. And so there were people who, so many record producers just wanted to be played on the air, so they sent, these disc jockeys were just overwhelmed with singles. And they had hired special people who would sort out the singles and listen to them carefully and see which ones had the best chance of getting on the air. And in those days, unfortunately, they played Doggy in the Window and all kinds of impossible things on those popular radio
like George
shows.
Jones and stuff.
Oh, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so I sat down and I wrote, and I picked up the phone and I called and I said, how long has it been since you played Benny Goodman or a jazz record on these radio shows? I want you to listen to this because it has a certain quality. And before I knew it, I had written to this guy in San Francisco and Los Angeles and Chicago, I remember St. Louis. And all of a sudden I had friends and said, they're not playing anything else on the radio but the record because they couldn't buy the record. So I was so frustrated, and I talked to Creed about it, and he got me an appointment with the head of MGM, which was the parent company, And there was this wonderful guy. I remember him very positively. I came in, a little sliver of a girl with a bow in my hair, and a record player that I bought so he could listen to the single. And sure enough, he was there with a cigar and the whole movie setting. And I saw his foot started tapping on the desk there. And I knew that I had him. So he said, so what is it you want? I said, a simple thing. I just would like you to release the record.
Right.
And he said, what? The record is not released? And I said, no, I can't get past this Hal guy. And he leaned over the desk. I'll never forget this. And he says, you want his job? I said, no, I don't want his job. I don't want anybody's job. All I want is to get this record released because we have fans all over the country now thanks to this radio play that we got. And nobody can buy a record. Don't you want to make any money in this company? And, of course, the world was my ticket after that. So he was just a tremendous help.
What was the feeling for you personally? Stan was obviously always trying to connect with the gods, playing music, and was always up for the live setting and could play for hours and hours. But what was it like when you started to hear that?
I'll tell you the first time.
Yeah.
Gary Burton has described the first time he heard it played, and I had a.
Do you still talk to Burton at all?
Every now and then. It's been a long time now.
That dude owes everything to Getz. Everything. Period. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
He was like our son. He was so
Dude,
sweet,
it was a ridiculous. I mean, Swallow. I mean, Stan was. I mean, these guys were just.
Steve Swallow too. Wonderful.
Stanley.
Wonderful.
But I'm just saying the Stan man was a father figure to those guys, as Teagarden was in some ways to Stan.
Mm-hmm.
That was the other point.
Yeah.
Is that before
He would call Gary the boy chick.
the boy chick? Yeah.
Well, anyway,
Burton.
I don't
I'm
want to
ready.
get off.
No. I want to.
Did
You
gotta let me answer
Okay,
it.
go ahead. Yeah, first time.
What was the feeling? I'll tell you what the feeling was. I'm driving home on the West Side Highway, and I put on just a regular, I think it even was a news program. And sure enough, they're telling me that this record is shooting up on the charts and just past the Beatles, and they played the whole segment. They didn't play the album, but they played the whole single, not this abbreviated version.
How long was the single? This is very important. How long was it was just side A? How long a track was it?
It was just a Girl from Ipanema itself with Astrid.
That's another whole story. We're gonna have to vet very seriously with that. But no. So you're on the West Side Highway and they're playing the single.
Yeah, they're playing the single.
Oh my!
And I just felt like I was flying in the sky like a Jonathan Seagull. It was just such a wonderful, uplifting feeling that one's single-minded, that one person could really change at least the little music world, It was such a wonderful feeling because here it wasn't just that it was surely becoming a hit, but that people were connecting. They were feeling the same way that I was feeling all alone about this music for so long and had to fight the entire powers that be in the music business. But that everybody in the world now was free to hear this and enjoy this, and people that was just my grandmother from the beginning. I just felt so empowered because it was also classy music and it was totally uncompromised. This album was made no different than any other jazz album that Stan had ever made. Never did any of them think of it in any other way.
Well, you mean in the sense that it was all first takes, or what do you mean by that?
No, in the sense that it had nothing to do with money or compromise or trying to sell out.
Oh, I love it. You're nailing this.
Well, that's how it was.
Yeah, but
It was
but
a
you have to realize for a
totally
Gen Xer and younger generations, this is why this is an invigorating thing, because this was not a monetization. It was about connecting with the gods, language of the
yeah.
gods.
It was, in a way, that, because neither one of them really could understand each other, and if I wasn't there to translate,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
they couldn't really talk. Simple things like "Where's the men's room?" and stuff.
Right,
You
right,
know, it
right,
was
right.
it was really a miracle, all of it, but they were so in tune with each other musically. You talked about Keita Beth, who I really admire
Rest
and
in
like,
peace. What a
but
beautiful individual.
yeah, but here was the original indigenous musicians playing like gods, all of them, and so in tune. It was just unbelievable.